Welcome to another episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Good evening, Tom. Are you well?
Yeah, really well, and really up for this conversation with Jon Hutchinson. Welcome to our podcast, Jon.
Thank you. This is a treat for me. I love this podcast. So it's weird and fun to be on it. Normally hear that introduction when I'm in the car or something.
Oh, that is funny. In fact, one of our recent episodes, I forgot our whole tagline thing at the end. It was like, I was so sort of in the conversation, I forgot. Then I listened back to it myself and thinking, oh my God, that actually was on it. So people do listen. So we know we're pleased with how many people listen, and it's great that there's a kind of community of people listening and talking about education, which is why we wanted you to come on, because you're one of the people who I think as kind of one of the most sensible people in the Twitter kind of edgy world. I always feel like, I really feel this. I feel like when you're involved or you're saying stuff, it's going to be grounded in like realities, common sense, balance, but also like innovation and ideas. And I can't remember a time of sort of edgy Twitter when you weren't on it. So it feels like you've been on it as long as I have. Although you changed your name halfway through, stream me a bit.
I did, yeah. I got married, and we speaking of being innovative, I took my wife's name instead of the other way around, which killed my brand. It really did.
Killed your brand.
I only know you as a Hutchinson. I'm in the post period.
Yeah, but and also, you're well, one of the things that it's obviously an important part, and you can talk about it, is the Reach Academy Foundation and the work of Reach, and you obviously have been a massive player, important part of their success, and so on. And there's loads of examples that we could talk about where I've seen you teach. Like there's videos of you teaching on the internet, which is pretty brave. And there's so many things that you kind of contribute to. But I want to give you a chance to just tell people. So, what is it you're currently doing? Where are you working? And just tell people a little about kind of what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently working with the Reach Foundation, which is kind of a slightly separate but connected entity to Reach Academy Feltham, which is a school that I joined in 2015 and still has a very, very special place in my heart. I go back once a term to do a bit of teaching and kind of hang out a little bit if they'll have me. But the Reach Foundation was set up really to try and partner with trusts around the country who are interested in taking a similar approach to community and school. So right from the start, Reach was a new school set up in 2012. And right from the start, what was really important to Ed Van Care and Rebecca Kramer, who set up the school, was that it was of the community, that it was small so that all children would be known, that it was all through, so we could develop relationships with families in over a long period of time, and capitalize on all of the kind of advantages that brings. But I think also increasingly, we probably when the school started and for the first few years, we were caught by this, I'm going to call it a myth now, which is that if you get kids a great set of qualifications, then all of the problems are solved. And I think that there's this idea that we can kind of fix things. We can fix social mobility and social justice by just getting kids all grade 9s at GCSE or A stars at A level. And I think increasingly we saw that wasn't the case for lots of kids. So we got really good results at Reach and we're really proud of them. But for many of our families and for many of our kids, that alone wasn't enough for them to be ready to enjoy a life of choice and opportunity. There was other stuff that for them and their families that needed to be in place. And also it kind of brought about, again, I think quite a pernicious idea, which is that the goal is to kind of escape your community, especially if you're working in disadvantaged communities. The community is the problem, your background is the problem, and if you can just get to Oxford and then live in Guildford, then everything will be okay. You've kind of solved it, and that increasingly didn't sit right to us, and so we established what we call the Cradle to Career Partnership, and a much broader kind of set a community offer, I guess, for within Feltham. And so now we partner with trusts around the country who are interested in taking a similar approach, with a massive caveat that in every community it's going to be different. And so it truly is a partnership, because everybody is going to approach this in slightly different ways, have slightly different needs, slightly different assets within their communities. And so a really fun job now is that I have, which is working with senior leaders and other professionals in local communities who want to understand their community deeply, and then think about what's necessary for all children to flourish within that community.
Wow, so people approach you, and you just, is it like a sort of a consultancy, or are there projects which you have which run over months and years, or how does it work?
So it's a 2-year partnership. And we ask each partner to, we've identified 5 threads that we think are really important. So the first is an all through curriculum, so that kids' curriculum from kind of certainly 4 or 5, but right up to 18 is coherent. And I can talk a little, that's my current bugbear, that this is a big problem in education, that we talk all of the time about prior knowledge and sequencing being important. And when kids get to about that tall, we just pretend that they haven't been taught anything and start again. And that is madness to me. I was at a conference recently, a brilliant conference, a science conference, and the teachers, brilliant teachers, committed teachers, were talking. They had this diagram up, and it was a circuit diagram with a bulb and a cell, and they were talking earnestly about how when kids come, they don't know what any of this means, and so this is how we can introduce it in concrete ways that will make sense to them. And it was all really sensibly, pedagogically and curriculum wise, but I was screaming inside thinking, kids learn that in year 2 and again in year 4 and again in year 6. You're not doing this for the first time. And it must feel like such a waste of time for those kids. It also is just a massive, I'm sorry, I've gone on to that rant, and it's not for now.
Right.
I'm loving it. Carry on, John. This is right up my street.
Let's part that one, because that was this strand 1 of 5. So like,
that was 5.
Let's hear the other first.
So thinking about curriculum in a much more coherent way, and that also includes 0 to 5 as well. The second part is great teaching. So for there to be a more coherent understanding of kind of principles of great teaching, and for those to be understood across the age range, but translated into the phase and subject in a way that feels sensible and appropriate, and using those partners who specialize in those areas to translate that. The third part is around relationships. So we have had a great conversation in education over the last 10 years around cognitive science, memory and learning, and I'm really glad that we've had it, and I think that education is stronger because of it. We've not had a commensurate conversation around relationships. We've not considered the evidence base around building, maintaining great relationships, and the importance for them, not only in the classroom and in terms of learning, but also in terms of partnerships with parents and schools feeling like a partnership with parents. And we're obviously right now in a moment where we're seeing a real fracturing of that and all of the problems that kind of flow from it. The fourth part is around community. So at Reach, we set up a children's hub, which was slightly separate to our school, and that focused on first of all, deeply understanding our community. So Luke Billingham led a listening project within our community. I think lots of schools fall into the trap of thinking they know what families want and then providing it to them. You know, here's a coffee morning. Nobody asked for it, but the coffee morning is what you have nonetheless. Understanding genuinely what the issues are. And for us in our community, there were a couple of things that came out. There wasn't enough perinatal support for parents within the community. Housing was a big issue, and SEND and parents with pupils with SEND feeling like that the system was really quite harshly set against them. So understanding the community and then building a set of services and initiatives that help to address that, but in a way, again, that feels of the community. So we work with Citizens UK on this, for example. They have this fantastic iron rule which is never do for others what they can do for themselves. Very difficult for schools and school leaders. It's not about schools doing everything. It's not about schools leading projects. It's largely about giving the time and space and infrastructure for community leaders who already exist within the community to lead that kind of work. And then the last part is kind of the leadership. So the last one is the leadership. So we'll work with leaders of the trusts or the local clusters of schools to really kind of champion, coordinate, create a theory of change around a more cradle to career experience for kids and families. So curriculum, developing great teachers, relationships, community, and the leadership of that. So we work with local clusters of schools, and they'll partner with us for 2 years, and there's a kind of a 4-phase process of that. It takes some time to discover, so to really understand what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, to define the specific opportunity that they have as a local cluster of schools, to develop a plan to address that, and then to deliver and implement it kind of robustly. So it's a slow process. Teachers are not used to working on 2-year timeframes. It's really quite tough for them. We found that lots of people find that really difficult because they're used to having a meeting on Thursday after school and putting a plan in place on Friday morning. And
it's so interesting. I mean, it's so I love it. I love how extensive and comprehensive that is. And I'm just sort of, it's funny because like what I also know you for, and we'll talk about this as well a bit, is like real like niche detail of like how to run a room, you know. And so you've got this like big macro vehicle for like community change on one end, but then when it comes down to it, it's like teachers in interaction with children in a room in a subject. And I love the whole breadth of that. But Emma, that's a pretty big opener.
I'm just reflecting on it at the minute. I was just really interested, Jon, in so how far into this process are you? Sort of how many cohorts have kind of been through or are going through, and what's been the learning along the way for you as an organisation with the different groups that are coming through?
Really good question. So pilot year was 3 years ago, and so we've had one pilot group who have gone through the 2 years, and then we have a set of 10 trusts who are about almost 18 months into the process now, and then our kind of third cohort who are just sort of like 3 or 4 months in. Loads of learning, loads of iterating. I think that some of it will be relatively obvious, which is capacity is just so low in schools at the moment. It's teachers, we're pushing against an open door talking about this stuff, especially post-pandemic, where schools did fulfill these kinds of wider roles, and we're really grateful and happy to do it, to get to know their communities better, to meet families' needs in a kind of deeper way. But capacity is just so low at the moment, where schools are largely just really struggling to kind of find people and have enough people to put them in the room. And it feels like the structures and systems that we have in education rail against this quite a lot. And that's similarly in terms of things like curriculum. So the primary national curriculum is incoherent when you compare it to the secondary national curriculum. So we have a structural incoherence that we're kind of often fighting against, as well as the incentives. So if you're a year 6 teacher, it's perfectly legitimate for you to say, listen, what I'm most interested in is getting kids to kind of get the highest percentage on the SATs that I can. That's our kind of big lever. That's our big accountability system. When I was a year 6 teacher, I was obsessed with how many kids had kind of like, back then it was level 4 and we're at level 4, or how many have met the TAF when I was teaching year 2, how many kids have kind of like met all the TAF, and that's kind of my whole world. And I gave very little thought, if I'm honest, to what are these kids going on to do next year or in 2 years' time. And I certainly had no idea of what are these kids expected to achieve in English, for example, when they're at GCSE. I think that institutional knowledge for primary colleagues, when it comes to what comes next, is really poor. And the same is true of secondary colleagues in terms of their understanding of what kids already know and can do. It's really quite weak when you ask them about what kids are coming up with. So one of the things that we found is that lots of the systems are kind of working against us, and people often have really limited capacity to want to change these. And so the kind of result of that is we've tried to really kind of encourage people to focus in, to zone in, and to get a small win. And over 2 years, it might feel very small, but in our experience, this is as much about changing hearts as it is about changing minds. So for everybody in schools, in the schools, to feel like they are one link in a chain for that child that is much bigger than they are, whether you're teaching them for year 5 or whether you've got them for GCSE, you're just one small part of that kid's journey, and it's incumbent on you and on the broader system to think about that journey in a much more coherent way. And so that kind of hearts as well as minds thing, and how we can kind of nudge people to do that, I think has also been a big learning.
So I mean, one of the things that Reach is known for, well, I don't know. When I say that, I'm sort of assuming other people know it the way I know it. So, so let me rephrase that as one of the one of the reasons things I associate Reach with is this sort of curriculum design, and I know that mainly because of you, but also you can look at it. It's kind of, you've made some of it accessible, and you do have some pretty special resources, and booklets, for example, around. For Key Stage 2 in history and geography. I've taken some photos of ones there, like of pages in the one about the Vikings, and it's Anglo-Saxons. It's like the reading, how much reading the children would do, the questions. A non-specialist teacher could pick that up and run a really great set of lessons with those resources, because the resources they get are really high quality, and then it's mapped through. And you also have this approach of like specialist geography and history as a quite a distinctive feature. That's what I remember. You might tell me it's changed, but whereas other schools are sort of more topic, interconnected topics focused, you took that approach, and I think that approach is really interesting. Is that when you go into schools, or because Reach may have evolved and changed over time, but do you sort of go in sort of advocating for this sort of things with booklets and readers and separate subjects, or do you just work with schools to do different types of curriculum development?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Like you said, we've got a bit of reputation because we published some booklets and we were a bit early on, and that's obviously sort of exploded. I think that it feels important for us when we're thinking about scalability and coherence and replicability. It feels important to kind of have some of those artifacts, because I'll illustrate this with a small story. I was teaching, so I was lucky enough, because our school is all through, I was teaching an A-level in religious studies, and I was teaching kids about the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount, it's important for lots of different reasons, but one of them is that there are huge parallels to Mosaic law, to the story of Moses, to the Exodus story. In fact, there are some literal quotes from Exodus. He went up the mountain. So Moses went up the mountain to receive the commandments. Jesus went up the mountain to deliver the Sermon on the Mount. So those kind of parallels are important theologically, in terms of this is the new set of commandments that are being given within the New Testament. But what I quickly realized from with the year 12s at the time in front of me was their understanding of the Old Testament was very weak. They didn't have a good understanding of the major stories, including the Exodus story of the Old Testament. And so I had to kind of abandon the lesson and do a crash course on sort of like the major beats of the Old Testament with them. And I was really grumpy when I was leaving that lesson, because I thought, I'm struggling to get through this spec as it is, and I don't have time to waste sort of going back over this old ground. What on earth are kind of these teachers doing before they come up? And I was having that grump to myself as I was walking down the stairs to teach my year 3s, which I was doing in the afternoon, and had an RE lesson with them. And I realized the person that I'm grumpy with is me. I'm about to go in, and we kind of have this opportunity here, but I don't think that can be held in somebody. It can't be held in people's heads. I would say I think that there's been a fetishization over booklets per se. The booklet isn't the thing; it's the deep thinking around the sequencing of the knowledge and the codification of that, and having clarity on what kids need to know that will help them to, for example, understand the significance of the Sermon on the Mount. I personally think that a booklet is a very neat way to kind of bring that in, and it's got other benefits, like you said, of sort of promoting lots of reading, and our kids at Reach in primary school will read a few thousand words of nonfiction each week, which just, I think, gives them a bit of an advantage because the amount that they're reading and how used they are to reading. But I think that there are probably other ways to achieve it. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a booklet, and I think that we should also, there are always trade-offs in education, and when generally speaking not good enough at talking about trade-offs. One of the trade-offs with booklets are it can lead to really dull lessons. I think that's the number one. There are others as well, but I think the number one is it can lead to really boring lessons where the teacher is just saying, open to page 1, start reading, question 2, write your answer, here's the answer, tick it or check it, let's read the next bit, which is not what it's designed to be. It's designed to kind of free up teachers, have that spine, so you know you're not going to just sort of be taken in whatever direction the conversation takes you. You've got a clear spine where kids are going to have that requisite knowledge to flourish in later years, but that the content itself is engaging, exciting, and fun to kind of learn. So it does feel important, things like booklet and things like booklets and curriculum, and I'm not sort of rowing back from them. But I think that the reason there's something a little bit deeper of the reason that's important is because it allows you in quite a neat way, in an artifact, to kind of codify that sequencing and ensure that clear coherence of the curriculum as kids move through.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there for me, John, because they are so useful for a non-specialist. And if you're teaching 12 subjects in primary and you can't be specialists in them all, they do provide that robust starting point with the information that you need, the information the children need to secure. But they potentially can be like a little bit too much broccoli. They're really, really good for you, but you have to have it in amongst a broader diet. And I think that the lethal mutation potentially has been that then everything becomes bookletized and everything becomes formulaic. So it's been really refreshing to hear you speak with such passion about them, and the detail and the content, the sequencing in amongst that, not losing the kind of the broader, richer other things besides broccoli.
we're pretty sort of I don't know, this is a generalization, but even the debates about this are kind of frustrating, the way they're kind of so sort of all or nothing. So, I mean, I've sat in a lot of lessons, Key Stage 2 lessons, where I'm thinking of, say, in my head, I've got, say, Reach booklets and, say, Christian Council Opening Worlds booklets in my head, which are packed with reading and images, and which are in front of the children on their table, which they could be reading themselves and then discussing, and then the teacher's kind of covering the same content on the screen through a PowerPoint, which doesn't have much reading in it. And even it does, you can't really read it from the back of the class, and you don't really read from a distance. It's not. And you're thinking, the booklet, in those moments, I'm thinking, oh man, bring in the booklets, because these children are not, they could be reading this, and then reading is, how else do we get reading into the curriculum? So of course, you could go all the way. If you're not doing booklets, and your alternative to that is, I'm sticking to my PowerPoint deck, I'm thinking, well, that's not the choice, is it? So you have to think diet, variety, but the quality. What I think is so powerful is the thinking, like you say, the thinking, the sequence, that the emphasis on reading is really strong, but it's also the thinking of this journey, and that's another thing. So one of the things that I love about the Reach materials, which again, I only saw, when I first encountered this, it's kind of stuck with me permanently, which is, I've got some slides that I've screenshotted from your website, which is like the geography, like mission statements for like Key Stage 2. It starts off by saying something like, our view is at Reach that when we teach geography at Key Stage 2, we're preparing students as if they're on a path to study geography at university, and as though it doesn't say they're going to, but with the possibility that some of them might, and some of them might just want to take their geography through into their general knowledge and be informed citizens. But to me, that's like, and I've said that to some key stage teachers, is like, that's a pretty awesome thing, isn't it, to think those children here are sort of on a path to study this as deeply as anyone, and we're the ones who get to be the kind of launch pad for that. Isn't that exciting? And some of them are going, that's kind of scary. But I love the ambition of that. Is that something that you include into your work now, or is that something that's quite specific to the original schools?
We had an obviously we had an opportunity, because we're an all through school, to backwards plan from 18, and it felt like the only sensible way to do that was to assume that every child would like to study every subject at university, because for some of them that will be true. For some of them, they want to study English literature at university. For some of them, they want to study history at university. And the problem is, in year one, you don't know which ones want to study what. And so you kind of have to backwards plan with the assumption of all. And as you say, they'll drop off along the way. But the reason they should drop off in year 9, if they decide to drop geography, for example, the reason they should drop off should be because I really love MFL and I want to be a linguist, and not because I'm rubbish at geography, I don't feel successful in it, I can't really see sort of like the path through to sort of to university or for further study with this. And so we obviously had the opportunity to backwards plan. We did an exercise together as a school where we kind of mapped that out. So all of the teachers from all the phases sort of wrote down what are the knowledges, skills, attitudes, experiences that kids will need at 18 to go and flourish in each subject at university. And part of that will be, they need to know these threshold concepts and they need to get great grades, but there'll be other things as well, like reading around the subject, for example, and seeing plays and so on. And then that allows us to say, well, if they need to be like that at 18, what do they need at 16? And a grade 9 at GCSE is fine. Yeah, okay, fine. But what do they need to get that grade 9? And again, not just in terms of the knowledge, but for them to be kind of passionate and motivated enough to be sort of pursuing those top grades. And then we could do that the whole way back. And we did that all the way right back into nursery. Now, the actual lists of like things, this goes back to the hearts and minds. We still have those documents, but the documents themselves, I don't think are the important thing. I think it was the process of all teachers, whether you teach kids who are 18 or 8 or 3, coming together and saying, we have this common purpose, which is this child having an excellent experience in this subject the whole way through that feels pretty coherent. What do we need to do for that to be as seamless as possible, which created a kind of, it shed quite a bit of ego. It shed the ego of like, my thing is my phase is the most important phase. And it also fostered a sense of kind of collegiality and humility and curiosity around sort of that whole journey for the kid, with the kind of expectation of, if they're behind in year 3 in geography, it's not going to be easier to catch them up in year 4. It's not going to be easier in year 8. We can't say, well, hopefully next year we'll sort it. It gets harder each year. And so it's kind of the urgency is I think more equally spread. There's no sort of, it's all on year 6 teachers at reach to kind of achieve the primary mission. That sense of urgency and accountability is sort of more evenly spread.
And it's kind of like almost like a sustainability aspect to the education, isn't it? You don't want to be the one then to close the door on that child. You don't want to be the one that says, well, it all ended in year 4. We were going great guns, and then they just started to hate it. But I guess that's not only got kind of implications for the teaching of it, but also the curriculum design, the whole experiences that children have. They're having to look at each phase and each subject in the round, as in, what will be your experience of this, and what will make you as a child want to carry on studying it. Yes, it will be success because that's a motivator in itself, but also how do you make each subject the path that the children want to follow? So like you say, by the time they get to wherever they are making their own decisions, that they're almost spoilt for choice because they are successful in all and kind of slightly in love with them all because they've had such a great experience of them as well. So I don't have had that conversation.
That's absolutely the aspiration. And quite often, so there's a risk, and I'm really influenced, Emma, by your work, Simplistus and Elysium, especially on kind of, because I think that I've probably been guilty, although I'm a primary teacher, primary background, of the kind of, there's a risk with this that you turn primaries into mini secondaries, and so I think that that's something that's also it's necessary to kind of guard against that, to think about what makes each phase kind of unique and where children are different at different phases. And so, yes, we want children to kind of have that sense of each sort of phase, we're on this kind of mission or it sort of feeds through. But that doesn't mean that all of primary is in service to secondary. And to give an example of that, where I don't think it's about primary, you need to throw out all of this curriculum stuff because it's not setting them up for, it doesn't get them ready for secondary. It can be small tweaks. So we split English into reading and writing lessons at Reach, so they have an hour of reading and then an hour of writing. And one of the books that the kids study is Skellig. When our secondary colleagues saw that we were studying Skellig, one of the first things they said was, "Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that the kids studied any Gothic literature at primary." You know that when they come into secondary, they study Jekyll and Hyde and A Christmas Carol and Macbeth, and then on into A level, other examples of Gothic literature. And I think that I was teaching Skellig at that time, and I was like, what's Gothic literature again? And they can say, well, look, like there are some conventions to Gothic literature, like, you know, there's normally a supernatural element, often takes place at night. There's a theme of like death. And I thought, okay, this is all making sense. There's a baby that's sort of possibly going to die at the start. Skellig is in this like dilapidated building at the bottom of the garden and Michael goes and sees him at nighttime. And it didn't hugely change the way that I taught it, but I could just start to introduce, first of all, use the language of this is a Gothic text. And second of all, like we know it's a Gothic text because a lot of it takes place at night. We're not quite sure. There's like an ambiguity around what Skellig is, whether he's an owl or an angel or a man. And that's quite Gothic as well, which means that when they go to secondary and they study Jekyll and Hyde, when the teacher talks to them about this is Gothic literature, and they might not be able to recite off the top of their head all of the conventions, but it sort of says to them, this is something that I'm kind of familiar with. The teachers have thought about this a little bit. This is that we've moved from one to the other, and so it doesn't need to be rewriting everything from scratch or hugely changing the way that you teach necessarily. But that shared knowledge, I think, can build, you can find a lot of those moments that make things feel more coherent for the kids, and they add up. That's really cumulative. The more of those that you find.
It's that kind of residual, gradual building of understanding, isn't it? You just kind of dropping something in that you might not expand upon in great detail, but they've just heard it before. But it's almost like when you watch a film and you get to the end and you go, oh no, I know why that bit happened at the beginning. It's like you didn't notice it at the time. You were just very carefully dropping in the little bits to make that full picture of understanding at the end, which it wasn't the focus of teaching Skellig, but you just decided to drop that in because eventually it will build up that deeper understanding. I love it.
You've done a lot of thinking over the years about, I mean, there's so much to talk about with you. So this is so many issues, so many interesting things. Because over the time, and I associate with, like, you know, there's a whole thing about, and it gets debated, doesn't it? It goes to and fro on knowledge rich and whether that's the kind of in vogue or not. And I still, because I see a lot of schools, and I still think that if you complain about the word knowledge rich, it must mean you've never seen any lessons where that was like a real issue. And so, like, don't lose the idea that children can know and should know stuff. But of course, and you've been always brilliant on this, like always, like back for years, that it's not a goal in itself. It's the way that we get richer schema that's much more interwoven. But of course, part of that is knowing some stuff. So one of my favorite blog posts that you wrote was, it said something like, knowledge organizers, you can use them too much or use them too little, essentially. And that to me is like, exactly, like it's not a pub quiz, a recall test, but at the same time, if you don't use them enough, children are drifting through just on a blur. So that the subtlety around that, like, we need to know some stuff so we can talk about the Romans, and we need to know some stuff so we can describe, different kind of kingdoms and compare and contrast, like your RE example about the Old Testament. But at the same time, in a way, almost any specific fact about the Old Testament is less important than the kind of general sense of it and its parallels. You know what I mean? It's so subtle, that. So tell me, I mean, because just to move on and get you to talk a bit about this, because I just think it's amazing. You've also developed this tool, and I don't know if it's connected to Reach or totally separate, but the Meno Academy, where you've been making these videos about a sort of primary history topics mainly, from what I see, where you're sort of saying, like, maybe help you understand the curriculum, and you basically explain like real lovely chunky topics, like I've got it in front of me: ancient Greece, Benin Kingdom, the Indus Valley Civilization, Roman Britain, and it's great stuff. Your stuff. They're so interesting just to listen to them and watch them. So how has that come about?
Yeah, so this is a side project that my brother and I do. My brother's a cameraman. He left the army after 15 years, and now he's a cameraman. He's actually currently in Iraq, which is why Meno is going slowly, because he gets sent off all over the world to do his kind of day job. Meno was one of Plato's dialogues. That's where the name comes from. And it's where he sets out his kind of theory of knowledge. And Emma kind of spoke about it before. It is entirely unreasonable to expect a primary school teacher to master the subject knowledge that's required in 12 subjects, because it's just so vast. However, as you also said, when you know a lot about something, you're more passionate, it's more exciting for the kids. You ask better questions, you give better explanations, you set up better activities. So there's a rub here of subject knowledge being absolutely crucial for kind of really knowledge rich but exciting and passionate lessons to happen in primary. And certainly for me, when I was teaching in primary, there being a bit of a dearth of, like, there's plenty of slideshows, there's plenty of slide decks on the internet that you can find, and you can also probably find like a 2-hour video on YouTube on like a particular topic. But primary teachers do not have 2 hours each week to kind of watch, like, scroll through a video or search through sort of resources. So we wanted to create something for teachers, which the videos are only ever 5 minutes. So you've got 5 minutes, you're going to be teaching the Benin Kingdom, you haven't taught it before. What's the kind of absolute core knowledge that you need to know about that? When was it? What were the big achievements? What changed over time? What's an ober? And then what we're developing alongside that for each topic is 6 more videos. So we'll just talk about Obo Owerri, for example, in one of them, or maybe just talk about the British punitive expedition, which was in 1899 and kind of was where Britain sacked the Benin Kingdom, stole a lot of those bronzes that we're having debates about whether or not we return at the moment. So it's assuming that teachers have kind of only got 5 minutes. You're going to be teaching a lesson on the British punitive expedition, 5 minutes on over your cornflakes or sort of the over your lunchtime. You can kind of get hit with the key knowledge, so you can feel kind of knowledgeable. And that means that if you don't buy into a scheme, and lots of schools don't, then when you're thinking about planning a kind of a unit on that, you kind of know the broad strokes of, okay, we're going to have to talk a little bit, if we're talking about the Roman Empire, we're going to have to talk a little bit about the invasions, maybe about Julius Caesar's like failed invasions, and then on to Claudius's invasions. We're going to talk probably a little bit about the Romanization of Britain and some examples of that, probably going to talk about Boudicca's rebellion. And it just gives you a sort of 5 minutes on kind of the key bits of that, which hopefully will kind of respect how time poor teachers are, while still allowing them to kind of center their planning and their teaching on the substance, on the content of the subject. So it's a long-term project. We're doing it we're doing it in our spare time, but we have about 50 videos of those kind of deeper videos. We call them focus videos in the can. And when we've got to sort of another 50 of those, then we'll release kind of version 2.0. That's probably going to be in Easter.
Wow.
John, I must tell you a funny story about those videos, because I was working with a school and they were revamping their history curriculum. And there were certain units of work where the school hadn't got a vast amount of resources for it. There wasn't an awful lot of kind of teacher subject knowledge around those units because they hadn't been taught before in school. And I went away and I came back a couple of weeks later and they've got all of these detailed things about each unit of work. It's like, this is amazing. Have you collated all this? And one of them went, you know, that Jon Hutchinson, we ran his videos through some AI software, downloaded the script of it, and we've made these booklets and we've made these knowledge organizers, we've made this and we've made that. That's like, you've literally downloaded John and that's now your history curriculum. And they're like, yes, it is.
That's a lawsuit pending there. I mean,
No. They had done some other things. But I was just like, that was such a, it was just like, the funny part of it with those, John, was the software had picked up your accent as well, so some of it wasn't a direct translation. But they had completely rewritten their curriculum just based on the support that you'd given them, and it was a school that was really in a tricky situation. So you'd done a wonderful favour for that school and for that staff and for those children. But it just did not make me smile when I went in. I was like, the Meno Academy on paper.
I'm really glad. That's exactly the point. Not all teachers want to be handed a set of booklets. Not all schools want to be handed a set of booklets. But what you also probably don't want is just a blank A3 sheet of paper, because then you kill teachers with workload and unfair expectations. And so the hope is that if you teach a scheme, it's still going to give you kind of some confidence around your own sort of like knowledge and maybe think about how you adapt it. But if you don't, it gives you exactly what the school has done. Yeah, some starting points to kind of map out a curriculum that's based in the content. So thank you for sharing. It's really good.
They'd had the richest conversations on the back of, because all you'd given them was the information, and they'd had to go away and have all the kind of pedagogical conversations, all the sequencing conversations, all the kind of, is this right for this year group? What should it was just the best starting point. So I did want to say thank you, and it is having a massive impact out there in schools. So it's an absolutely wonderful resource.
Yeah, well, it's hard because we've tried to be really disciplined of specifically not saying this is how you should teach this, or this is kind, but it's hopefully empowering, because it's just this is kind of substantive knowledge that currently what we understand about this
massively. So and that's what the grants are used for.
Another thing I've got in my head, so many things to talk about. So this is where you're a bit of a kind of, I don't know, a renaissance person of education, because you've got so many layers to what you can you talk about, and one of them is also instructional coaching. And so you're in that space of people talking about what it is, how to do it, the spirit of it, the process of it. And I'm really interested, like, because of your curriculum focus, then this came up to me, like, even just today, this whole issue of specialism in subject when you're helping a teacher develop their teaching, versus the kind of, some general things about running the room, behavior, questioning, and where you're at that kind of, you can see the cusp of all those things, that where they all intersect. What's your experience of that when you're coaching, or developing schools' capacity for coaching, or CPD broadly? Where do you feel the tension is there? Do you think primary schools, for example, can meaningfully coach in subject disciplines, or does it tend to be more general? I mean, or secondary? What's your view of that?
So yeah, I wrote a chapter for one of the research ed guides in instructional coaching. Renaissance man's a very kind compliment. The joke within Reach is that my title is director for taking credit for other people's work.
It's a great title. I'm sure you've earned it.
I have earned that. So I wrote down sort of what everybody else at Reach does, because I was never a very good coach. I wasn't a great teacher either. I wasn't bad, but I wasn't a great teacher or a great coach. But what I can do is write it down. So that's what I take my time doing. So Reach has always instructionally coached since 2012, and there was a big there was kind of, from Rebecca, especially Rebecca Kramer, a kind of big emphasis on the quality of teaching is the thing that matters the most. And so if in terms of, we can only spend the limited resources that we have in so many ways, we're going to make quite a big bet in terms of putting a lot of chips on the instructional coaching and teacher development square. And obviously it's taken off a lot since, partially because of the ECF and partially because I think that schools are seeing this as a way to develop teachers. I think that there is nobody has a monopoly on the term instructional coaching, and nobody has a monopoly on the particular kind of approach. And I've seen it fail in a lot of schools. So I've worked with lots of schools over the last few years, and I've probably seen it fail more than I've seen it succeed. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for that. The top one is going too big too fast, and trying to roll this out across a whole school where there isn't already in place a kind of really good shared knowledge and understanding around principles of effective teaching. But I think another one to speak to your point, Tom, is, and this is something I've noticed more recently, is I do think that in too many cases, instructional coaching sticks with behavioral action steps for too long. And I think that there's a reason for that. It's because they're really visible, and they're really relatively straightforward to kind of chunk down and practice. If you want to do threshold, then it's pretty easy, right? It's very visible. If a teacher's not doing that, they're not welcoming kids into the classroom in a straightforward way. And it's important, right? It is important to have a strong start to the lesson. But I rarely see coaches or schools get into the weeds on what is the best way to break down a worked example on a really strong piece of descriptive writing, like a descriptive, like what's the best way to talk about shades of meaning with different adjectives in a key stage 2 writing lesson. I think instructional coaching is a brilliant way to do that, because it allows that shared thinking of that there was a gap, there was a problem here, like we'll focus in together. This is not about it being airy fairy. We can stick with, we're doing some descriptive writing. The kids' descriptive writing isn't very good. They're all using, gargantuan or whatever, and it's not necessarily appropriate. How can we get them using shades of meaning, understanding shades of meaning with adjectives, and the way you can manipulate sentences by sort of shifting one word? And you could have a really good, rich, shared conversation about that, which results in some forward planning and deliberate practice around sort of, and I don't see a lot of that. And I think that's a huge shame, because I think that often that's what teachers receive really well, giving them a chance to have a thought partner with which to kind of discuss that. And I think that probably at the moment it probably is a bit too focused on kind of like cold calling and threshold, because those are things that are relatively easy. And if you want every teacher in your school to do cold calling, then just get everybody in the hall and tell them that you're all doing cold calling. I don't understand why you'd use instructional coaching to do that. If you've already decided that that's going to be the action step, and just email everybody. The opportunity with instructional coaching is to go in with a genuine professional curiosity to see what is happening, and then to have a conversation with the teacher around what you noticed there. And so I think I would like to see, in answer to your question, I'd like to see a bit more subject specificity with coaching, and think a little bit more about the teaching, rather than the kind of.
I feel like like in football, American football teams, they have like coaches for defense and attack and that kind of stuff, and football teams do. I feel it's almost true for teaching, like, because I do think there is mileage in coaching people on things like cold calling and think, pair, share, because they do that. There's techniques you use all the time, and you do a training session and sort of explain it, but then doing it, actually, is everyone able to do it, and so on. But then, and one person might coach multiple people on those techniques because they are generic, but they don't necessarily notice or can't have the conversation about how to use adjectives for shades of meaning, because they themselves, they can do only a sort of facilitated conversation asking questions, but they wouldn't be able to suggest. And I think that's an important part. So that's where I think the tension is. It's having the people with that breadth of knowledge to be able to do all of that. Not everyone, it's a capacity question, isn't it? You want to develop those rounded people. I love coaching maths and science teachers because I can just get right into the topic as well as the generic. But
that speaks to like implementation science is kind of really good on this, because if you want to implement anything, like one of the first things you have to consider are resources available, and different schools have different resources available, and that's going to change the way that you implement something. So it may be that you say, actually, we don't have subject specific expertise, like the people who can coach MFL teachers are teaching the whole time, so they're not going to be able to do kind of specific MFL teaching. So that's just not something we're going to pretend to offer. We do think that, you know, we do have the capacity or the need to think about more generic or behavioral. It could be that, you know, it could be that the school's on fire in terms of behavior, and so actually instructional coaching around behavior is really appropriate, and it would be that would be the biggest bang for your buck. But I think that there are often diminishing returns, and I think that you get teachers rolling their eyes because they asked a question where they didn't cold call one time in the hour-long lesson. It happened to be during the 10-minute drop-in, and the coach becomes like a speed camera of like, I've got you.
No, nightmare. Yeah, that's so interesting. But this is the thorny stuff, isn't it? I mean, this is where you're talking about, who do I have? What are our challenges? How do we solve it? And I love because looping back to your opening kind of introduction, that holistic. And I don't know what you think, but as Jon's been talking, I'm sort of drawing all these lines between sort of Zaretta Hammond, who we've had recently, talk about ready for rigor and having to build trust and relationships so that you can be demanding, and going back to Sufi and Sadiq, who we interviewed last year, about his whole community outreach stuff, and then into the cognitive science and the knowledge rich stuff. It's so, but you're kind of like in there weaving this all together, and it's so brilliant. I love it, the way you describe all these ideas are part of one curriculum, one school, and you have to try to find the way to bring them all together.
I think it's the kind of professional openness of the people that Jon's working with, as in that they're open to talking about that whole journey, and open to talking about the influence of other subjects or the phases or the aspects of the children's experiences, and the aspects of the influence of community and involvement with the community on that. And it's kind of taking that step back and looking at the whole offer and everything that surrounds each child, and thinking, this is what I need to look at. If I need my bit to be good, I actually need to look at everything that's influencing that child, not just my own little domain that I'm in my classroom. So I just think this kind of spirit of openness that Jon's promoting and working within is fascinating, and really heartening to hear that it's not, yes, you go granular on the detail, but actually what you're looking at is that really rounded offer that sits around all the children that come to you. So really, really thrilling to listen to. So thank you.
Well, look, Jon, we're getting the red lights flashing big time in the producer box there. So look, we'll have to wrap it up there, but it's been honestly a real joy talking to you. I love everything you're doing, and good luck with Meno Academy. And really, everyone listening to that is going to be following what Reach Foundation is doing, and anything we can read about that, because that just sounds such a fantastic endeavor. So thank you for joining us.
It was a real treat to talk all this through. So thanks both for having me on.
Okay, so thanks everyone listening. We're again thrilled with all the listeners we've had. We've just got, thousands of people listen to our podcast there, which is just crazy. But thank you so much for listening. And we're looking forward to this episode coming out, and all the episodes that we've done since Christmas are all bangers. So check them all out. Thank you so much for joining us on Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me and Emma and Haringey, and we'll see you all really soon.
Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner, and I've been presenting with my co-host Tom Sherrington. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, share on social media, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel, search for Mind the Gap with Tom and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership,
and our producer for today's episode was Luke Kemper.